I'm Mike Hartman, co-editor of the Giving Review, one of three, and we have hauled Ryan Streeter back to continue the deposition. Spoke with Ryan last November, I think it might have been, Ryan, about state and local government, compassionate conservatism, what philanthropy can do to replace stagnation with dynamism, as you were putting it at the time. And we have Ryan back because he has written a paper for the American Enterprise Institute, where he is the director of domestic policy studies. And the paper is entitled The Role of Community in Place-Based Giving. So we're going to do a little, in law school in the case books, we'd have pocket parts, where since a new case arose after the publication of the book, that they'd have to put a pocket part in there to address that particular case. So that's what we're doing here now with your paper, Ryan. In the writing of it, in the typing of it, there must have been a point where you were sitting in front of the keyboard thinking to yourself, what's a good word for proximity in time or place or kinship? And you went with the word propinquity. Why and what does your paper have to do with proximity in time or place or kinship?
Very good. Well, thanks for having me back on. First of all, it's great to be back with you. And I didn't remember having used the word propinquity until you brought that out. And I guess I should point out to the viewers, this is not in the title of the paper. It's not, if you pulled that out of one of the following pages, but yeah. The point of the paper is to really take a look at what community building and community giving looks like through the lens of social science research on relationships, on local networks, on what we call social capital. And so what I was trying to suggest in the piece is that when people are close to each other, but also close to the kinds of institutions at the neighborhood level that bring them together, whether formally or informally, good things just happen as a result of that. I mean, that's what we've really learned. And this might sound, again, like I'm citing social science to explain what is just common sense and obvious to most people, but sometimes that's what people in my line of work do. But I do think that the research suggests some things that maybe aren't always self-evident to people, and that is, if you live close to a number of community amenities and institutions, and those can be things like your public park, a library, your kid's school, your house of worship, a charity that you volunteer at, and you're there regularly, those regular interactions with people whose names you might not even know, or you might not know their last name, but it's that familiar barista, it's that person you always run into at the dog park, and you begin to talk about things going on in the community. What we've learned through our research and the research of others is that those regular interactions with familiar people boost a sense of pride of place and make people feel defensive in a good way of the community where they live, and more likely to say yes if someone says, hey, do you want to come Thursday night to this community meeting? We're talking about kind of these zoning issues related to this new building that's going in. You're much more likely to say yes to that and to be involved in your community. And where you have that kind of mutual engagement and with each other and care of place and community, especially when you have a number of civic organizations in that community as well, a higher sort of density per capita of nonprofits, of houses of worship. You also have higher rates of economic growth. You have just more good spin-off activity, because those networks, those relationships, actually, when you sum them kind of all up, they actually have very material consequences for a community. So the basic point is propinquity, being proximate to other things and people, when it's a diverse number of things like institutions and amenities, it actually really creates positive good for a community. And that's kind of what that word was sort of drawn up to kind of reinforce.
Yeah. So here's the actual quote from your paper, which is in line with your summary of it there just now. I'm quoting you, right? So this comes out at your time. Our sense of community is stronger when we regularly encounter familiar faces. And then you go on to say such encounters are only possible with when the propinquity of everyday places makes them so. So is place-based thinking like this, like yours, in tension with notions of national identity that seems so ascendant in conservatism now? We can't be so familiar with every face in the nation. You've got a challenge when speaking to the conservatism of today, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the kind of rise of economic populism and conservative nationalism on the right in America. Tons of people have written about this. I don't need to go over it all, but that's all happened for very understandable reasons over the last 5 to 10 years. This kind of divide between cultural elites and everyday people, and all of the economic and cultural issues that are related to that. But your question, what's behind your question, I think, is a really important point for people who care about the health of their communities today. And that is, we have so many outlets, and so many more outlets now than we did just 20, 30 years ago, to preoccupy our mental energy and our emotional energy with kind of large ideological questions. And this is on the right, it's on the left, it doesn't know a home politically. This is just what's happened in America. And we tend to get really exercised and animated about those things too. It's much easier to turn out a bunch of people to march on the mall over climate change or inequality than it is to get 150 people to march on City Hall to fix the potholes, right? You might be bouncing over potholes down your street and complaining about them all the time. But then when you're on Twitter, on Facebook, kind of screaming at your bubble of friends who already agreed with you before you started screaming about what's wrong with the world, you're screaming about these things that kind of occupy the collective national conscience. And so I think, for social entrepreneurs at the local level, it's really important to realize that most Americans still live local lives. They may not behave that way on social media, but when you add up the number of hours in a day and where people's concerns are, their concerns are about their kids and their community and what's going on in their relationships at work or at church or what have you. And the challenge then for social entrepreneurs is how to take that reality and build upon that, to help to find ways to create more channels for people's emotional and other energies to be transferred into productive activity at the local level, because that's where greater life satisfaction comes from. It boosts your happiness more. Belonging in a community is associated with all kinds of personal and social goods. And the more time we spend preoccupied with kind of national political ideological issues, the more we're taking away from those things. And the last point I'll make on that is that we've found, I've written about this, but we've found this very clearly, that when politics or spending all your time on your politics as a hobby, and that can be formally volunteering in a campaign, but it can also just be spending all of your time on social media in your ideological bubble. That's associated with much higher levels of social isolation and loneliness. Even people that say they have lots of friends are unhappier with their lives when politics is their only kind of voluntary outlet. And that shows up pretty clear in our data. Whereas every other form of voluntary behavior leads to less loneliness, as you'd expect. I mean, if people are involved in the lives of others, or volunteering at a charity, or they're at church, they have a sense of purpose and place and all of those things. It's people who choose to spend all of their time with their political buddies who end up having the exact opposite experience. So that's just instructive. It means that we should be creating more and more ways for people to constructively improve in the betterment of the community where they live.
So if you've sold me, and I'm a giver, hypothetically, interested in place-based grant making, do I have to be from the place in which I'm going to be making grants, or can I just visit? I mean, you said I don't have to know the barista's name or the people at the dog park, but I mean, does it have to? Palm Beach would have a lot of social services, but can I pick a place nearby, or even maybe far away, and still do place-based grant making?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that clearly having a connection to that place matters. And, obviously givers, you may not live in the community anymore, but a place where you grew up, or a place where you have an important part of your history woven through the fabric of that community, is always going to make you a little bit smarter as a giver in terms of what you're giving to. But I think, I wouldn't want to be overly restrictive on what local giving means. I mean, you can think of an entire metropolitan area. If you're a social entrepreneur in an area, and because of the reasons of your business or other civic engagements, you kind of care about the whole place. There might be overarching issues, in a particular city that you care about. It could be clean streets. It could be better parks. It could be better opportunities for low-income kids in the neighborhoods that are the most distressed, and finding new ways to create the kind of grassroots connections in those communities. And the examples abound all across the country. Lots of people have figured this out. I'm just reporting on research that shows that what those people are doing is the right thing to do. And so it's really, thinking about tightening up the social capital that could be better, but already has the seeds of existing in a particular place, and creating those kinds of relationships, bringing unlikely bedfellows together around a common problem. To do that, you have to have some knowledge of the community, or at least know people who do.
At the end of your paper, you've got you might throw a little elbow, I don't know, you tell me, where you say, and I'm quoting you again here now, funding connectedness is more important than is trying to fund specific outcomes. Now you're citing social science, which one might think is dependent in large part upon measurement. But what do you mean by that line? What is this connectedness of which you speak, and is it measurable?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think, you know, this isn't a cop out, but the answer is kind of both and. I mean, there are things that are measurable, and the things that just aren't. And I'm saying this as someone who wrote a book a long time ago called Transforming Charity, which focused on outcomes-based social enterprise and giving. I still stand by all of that. I think, you know, the point being that it's important to kind of know what improvement looks like, to be able to define that, and to make sure that your giving is going towards what does improved outcomes for kids mean? What does a richer park system in a city look like? I mean, you have to be giving towards certain goals that you can in some way or another measure. But the point there from the paper that you were reading is that there's just so much evidence that when you bring people together who share common concerns, they care about the community, they sort of share that sense of outcome. They know what the outcome is. They may not all articulate it the same way, but they know what improvement or betterment in that community looks like. As long as those people are motivated and they have a vision of what they want to achieve, making it possible for them to do what they need to do is sometimes a question of resources. And that's where, you know, social entrepreneurs and people with money to give can actually make a real difference by bringing those people together and just letting them do what they'll do. And they may clean the streets and improve the parks or provide outcomes for kids better in a way that's different than you envision, but I'm pretty sure you'll appreciate the outcome better than whatever it was you're envisioning, because of the unique knowledge and abilities and motivations of the people involved. I've written about a couple of my colleagues have. We've welcomed him to events at AEI. One example of this is the Family Independence Initiative that Mauricio Miller has created. You know, after many years of doing more traditional kind of community-based interventions, for which he was nationally celebrated and received awards, he kind of scratched his head after having been, you know, successful as a community developer and builder, and realized that, you know, what was really behind the success was just finding ways to allow people, even people with very limited means, you know, low income communities, bringing families together around common goals, like helping each other buy homes or helping each other's kids get into better schools, and but having a plan together, and then providing the resources that those people needed to do that, and not getting in the way. And, you know, to find out really after they studied this for a number of years that the outcomes have generally been really good. And I think, you know, anyone who's watching who's been involved in their community could probably point to examples in their community where this kind of thing happened as well. It happens sort of organically because of the nature of the people involved. But a lot of times the people who are motivated to improve their communities, just they don't know how to find each other, or they even if they did, they wouldn't quite know how to bring together or marshal the resources that they need to achieve what it is they're hoping to achieve. And so I think, you know, that's really the main conclusion of the paper that you read, which is that being more creative about just bringing talented, motivated people together, and often people without a lot of resources on their own, is probably going to create improvements that you couldn't have orchestrated yourself with a plan, with a 5-year plan to make this neighborhood better, with a specific, you know, a delimited list of 8 outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. There are a lot of examples of failure in that type of approach. And so this other way is I think kind of rooted in just kind of, you know, what we know is true about human nature and what we know happens when you bring good people together.
So this is a follow-up conversation of sorts, and we'll just finish it by wondering whether you're going to follow up in any way, you or AEI, on this place-based giving as a way to develop community concept.
Certainly, and the paper itself is a part of a series. So there are other papers in that series that will be coming out. We also have a survey center for American life at AEI, which we started over the last couple of years to really kind of look at America beyond political attitudes, for some of these reasons I was saying earlier, just about how political ideology drives so much of our mental space these days, and to do large national surveys that ask people a lot of questions about their everyday lives in their communities, to try to understand these fundamental realities of social capital, connectedness, networks, and the like, and their effects. And we've got another large national survey we'll be doing soon on this question of neighborhood sort of structure, design, amenities, institutions, you know, how people's involvements in their institutions, in their communities, create certain outcomes in a way that's different than those who are disengaged. And we'll be doing future national surveys, probably within the course of the year, on broader questions of community life in America. So yeah, it's a stable part of our business right now, if you will, to be producing research in this area, just because we feel like it fills a gap that was sort of left in the years when people sort of departed this work after the early 2000s, after having all learned the lessons from Bob Putnam's research and others. And we just noticed there was kind of an open space when it came to thinking about what this research means for policy and practice as well. So yeah, this is one piece among, I think, what you'll see as many in the coming years from AEI.
Well, great, Ryan. Thanks so much for putting up with us again, and take the rest of the day off.
Always a pleasure. Good to be with you. Thanks. Take care.